Well, this weekend, the 38th Noho Pride Parade and Event will be held in Northampton, an annual celebration of the LGBTQ community. It comes on the heels of the April release of the Massachusetts Commission on LGBTQ Youth report and some stark numbers. LGBTQ students are 3.2 times more likely than other students to have hurt themselves on purpose or to have considered suicide. And about 16% of LGBTQ students, as opposed to 4% of their heterosexual cisgender peers, have attempted suicide in the past year. I sat down with J.M Sorrell, a spokesperson for Noho Pride, and asked her, why are LGBTQ youth more at risk for self-harm?
I think it has to do with isolation, social norms, peer pressure, all those things. I mean, everything's magnified when you're a teenager anyway. And we certainly have it better in Massachusetts than in many states, but there's still bullying. I think there's more cyberbullying now too. People are anonymous and they're hiding behind their bullying. I think that's more common than just outright direct bullying. And you know, it's a matter of how much support a school system is giving to LGBTQ teens and what's going on in the home, parental support. It's a myriad of factors.
Do you know how much of the youth population identifies as LGBTQ?
Pretty significant in Massachusetts. 15.2%, I think, is the percentage.
What are the resources available for them in schools?
Well, a lot of the high schools and even some middle schools now have student alliances that have LGBTQ teens, younger students, and their allies. So they have, it's often a social club. They do peer-to-peer education at the schools. But it really, I think, starts with the leadership. What is the superintendent of the schools doing for priority, and the principals and the teachers? And you know, how does that trickle down? But I know when I was younger, there was no such thing as a gay-straight alliance or anything like that, but those are pretty common now in schools, and I think that's really helpful.
The report also noted that a lot of these students are skipping school. LGBTQ students are more likely to skip school than their peers. Why is that?
Avoidance. I think that if they're being bullied or they're afraid of being outed, you know, a lot of people are still closeted too for a variety of reasons. Avoiding school is one of the best ways to not be found out, to not subject yourself to bullying. Some of it might be conceived by the person themselves. You know, there's so much fear. And I think some of it's realistic too. You know, groups of people in that age group and well into adulthood, as you know, are in cliques and groups and their expectations. And I think it can just be overwhelming, in particular for LGBTQ teens.
Do you think there's enough education for heterosexual, cisgender teens in terms of inclusion and diversity in schools?
No. And I think you're probably going to point to that. The commission is recommending that there be more cultural competence training, more inclusivity exercises for people. I think it's hard. If you, I teach older adults and middle-aged adults LGBTQ competence, and I use empathy exercises. Everybody can relate to feeling left out of a situation, and I think that that needs to be stepped up in schools. I think if you understand somebody, if you understand that someone is hurting, you're a lot less likely to pick on them or to bully them.
The Commission's recommendations focused on inclusion, homelessness, the justice system, and health. What do you think should be some of the main efforts in these areas to focus on?
Well, I think with homelessness, I mean, that's a major problem in our world. With LGBTQ homelessness, a lot of teens are kicked out of their homes because the parents might not agree with them in terms of a religion or a cultural background. And there's more risk of isolation. So once they get into even shelters or situations like that, they still might feel a lot of stigma. So with homelessness, well, we just need to address homelessness in many, many ways. But certainly the same kinds of training and inclusivity that's being done in schools can be done in homeless shelters. And anybody that's staffing any kind of organization that serves LGBTQ teens should be aware of some of the particular challenges of those populations.
Last Thursday, the state Senate voted 39-1 to allow residents to choose a non-binary gender designation of X on driver's licenses and birth certificates. How important is this? Should it be passed by the House and the governor?
Extremely important, especially today because kids identify as gender fluid, as non-binary, as they're exploring, which I think is very natural in those years when they first get a driver's license. Some people don't want to be boxed into female or male, and even later in life. I said something to Senator Comerford, who was really responsible for moving this through, that when I was younger, I was fairly gender nonconforming, the tomboy type of person. I might have had X on my driver's license. So I think it would have been important to me when I was younger. I can put myself in the shoes of others who are gender nonconforming.
Any other legislation you'd like to see pushed through at the state level?
Our state's pretty good. We're heading into a 30th anniversary from when Governor Michael Dukakis signed into legislation protection for lesbians and gay men for employment, housing, public accommodation. We were the second in the country. And as you know, we now have transgender protection as well. I don't know legislatively. I think it's more about the hearts and minds of people that we need to get to. We just need to do more legwork to spread the word, to reach as many LGBTQ teens with support as we can.
Given all that we've discussed today, how important and relevant are events like the Noho Pride event this coming weekend?
I was talking to somebody the other day. I think it's morphed into more of a celebration and less of a protest, a little bit of both. People are now concerned about transgender people serving the military, for instance. That's become a big issue. And that the employment issue is going to go to the Supreme Court with 3 cases. Doesn't look really good for us right now. So there is some backlash happening. Generally, though, in Northampton, 38 years down the line, this is a huge celebration. And I see more and more kids and teens showing up, and I can only imagine how affirming it is for them, particularly if they're in a high school or middle school setting where they may not have a lot of peers that they can identify with. Showing up for that is a great networking event. There's a particular youth area. In fact, there are going to be some workshops this year. And, it's a day when everybody can feel the love. We have lots of allies there as well.
And how important is it to you that everybody attend and not just the LGBTQ community?
Great question. I think it's crucial. When back in 1983, the first march that I attended, we didn't even imagine there would be an ally marching with us. Now we've come to expect that, and I think they might outnumber us even. But I think that sends a public message, a very clear message that this is a celebration of community and that we're integrated and we're in it together. And there's no reason for us to be segmented or to be ostracized. And I don't think any civil rights movement moves ahead well without allies. So everyone should show up. And it's fun. It's free parking, free admission. What's not to love?